In this lesson, we're continuing our discussion of criminal homicide. Specifically, we're moving past our discussion of common law murder into our discussion of common law manslaughter. If you remember though, from our last few lessons on common law murder, we said that common law murder consists of the unlawful killing of another human being with malice aforethought. And we spent a lot of time really breaking down what malice aforethought means. Remember, this is essentially just a mental state requirement, and we have 4 different mental states that can ultimately get us to malice aforethought. We had the intent to kill, the intent to inflict grievous bodily injury, we had reckless indifference to an unjustifiably high risk to human life or depraved heart murder, and ultimately we had that intent to commit a felony under the felony murder rule. Right? All of these were ways we could get to malice aforethought. Now, important to recognize, even if all 3 of these elements are satisfied, right? We have the unlawful killing of another human being with malice aforethought, even express malice aforethought, right? That intent to kill. It's always possible that mitigating facts could exist that would mitigate the offense from manslaughter. This is why, if you remember back when we kind of laid out the big picture flow of the criminal homicide analysis, we said the next step after your common law murder analysis has to be, well, are there mitigating facts? Is there a way that the charge could be reduced from murder to manslaughter? And the big one that we're thinking about is this idea of the sudden heat of passion killing, right? Voluntary manslaughter. If we find that these 3 elements are satisfied, even with the intent to kill, right? Especially with the intent to kill, right? We have an unlawful killing of another human being with the intent to kill, right? That's going to look like murder immediately in our heads, but it's important to make sure that there's not mitigating facts present that could reduce that charge to voluntary manslaughter. Because we say at common law, even if these elements are satisfied, an intentional homicide committed in sudden heat of passion as a result of adequate provocation mitigates the offense to voluntary manslaughter. Right? And this requires that the following 4 elements are satisfied. So if all 4 of these elements are satisfied, we can mitigate a common law murder charge to a common law voluntary manslaughter charge. Okay, which of course is going to be attractive for the defendant if this is possible, because voluntary manslaughter is a less serious offense than murder, which means voluntary manslaughter is generally going to have less serious punishments than murder would. Okay, so the first element that we're going to have is that the actor must have acted in heat of passion, right? Our next element is going to be that the passion must have been the result of adequate provocation. Our third element is going to be that the actor must not have had a reasonable opportunity to cool off. And finally, the actor's motivation for the homicide must be causally linked to the provocation. Again, if all 4 of these are satisfied, then the defendant is entitled to having that murder charge mitigated to voluntary manslaughter. Okay, let's just break this down element by element. Number 1, the actor must have acted in heat of passion, right? This is the big distinguisher between murder and voluntary manslaughter. This idea of sudden heat of passion, right? We're looking for a very intense arousal of emotion that causes this person to lose control and kill somebody, right? In this sudden heat of passion. Right? When we're saying passion, passion includes any violent, intense, high-wrought, or enthusiastic emotion, right? This is not limited to anger. This could be based on different types of emotions, fear or jealousy or inadequacy, right? There's a lot of ways someone can experience sudden and intense passion. We often think of anger, but it could be other types of emotion, right? There is no bright line rule on defining what emotion specifically we're looking for, right? We're just looking for that heat of passion, which is anything that's violent, intense, enthusiastic, right? It's not limited to anger, but this is the state of mind requirement. We do need this arousal of sudden and intense passion and emotion, right? Next, we say the passion must have been the result of adequate provocation. And this is probably the most important part of the analysis. We need adequate provocation. Just sudden and intense emotion by itself is not enough to mitigate a murder offense to a voluntary manslaughter offense, right? We need the passion to have been the result of adequate provocation. We say provocation is adequate if the provocation would cause an ordinary person to lose control of his actions and his reason. Right, so important to understand what we mean, number one, by an ordinary person, because this is different than maybe what we're used to when we think about the reasonable person, maybe in the tort sense, right? Because a reasonable person, if we just think, back to our course on torts and the reasonable person standard of care, right? We know that a reasonable person probably wouldn't kill another human being based on a sudden impulse or emotion, right? That's not how reasonable people behave. So what we're really thinking about here is kind of just this objective ordinary person, right? When we say an ordinary person, or it's generally accepted, right, that an ordinary person is of average disposition, sober at the time of provocation, and of normal mental capacity, right? These are the big three. When we're doing a voluntary manslaughter analysis, right, and we're asking whether this provocation would cause an ordinary person to lose control of his actions and his reason, we're thinking about a person that is of average disposition. So, a defendant can't claim, well, I'm just short-tempered, right? It's easy for me subjectively to fly off the handle, right? I'm just a very short-tempered person by nature. No, we're going to hold them to the standard of a person who has average disposition, someone who's more even-keeled, right? We're going to hold them to the standard of somebody that was sober at the time of provocation, right? It's not going to work for a defendant to say, hey, look, I was really drunk here, right? I was really intoxicated, I was really drunk. That's why I flew off the handle and couldn't control my emotions, right? We're going to hold them to the standard of an ordinary person who is sober at the time of provocation and of normal mental capacity, right? We're not going to allow the defendant in a voluntary manslaughter analysis to bring in, any subjective qualities that really diminish their mental capacity, right? Any type of disorders, mental disorders or illnesses that might lower somebody's mental capacity really is not a part of an adequate provocation analysis and a voluntary manslaughter analysis. Now, it is important to recognize that a lot of these facts could still be relevant to the analysis, just to the criminal homicide analysis, but not to the voluntary manslaughter analysis, right? If a person has a severe mental illness, right, that diminishes their mental capacity, right, that's still a relevant fact, but that would go to our possible defenses, right? Maybe that goes to not guilty by reason of insanity, right? We're not going to analyze that, though, under our adequate provocation analysis. Same thing with sober at the time of provocation, right? If somebody's saying, hey, I was really intoxicated at the time this happened, right? Intoxication is a possible defense under the right circumstances, so we'd still discuss it, but it just really wouldn't be relevant to our adequate provocation analysis, right? We're going to hold somebody to the standard of an ordinary person who is sober at the time of the provocation, right? Same thing with average disposition, right? Maybe some facts in this analysis could go to other possible defenses, but that's outside the scope of our adequate provocation analysis, right? So what is an example of provocation that is considered adequate, right? What is adequate provocation? What would cause an ordinary person to lose control of his actions and his reasons? What would cause a person of average disposition, sober at the time of provocation, and of normal mental capacity to lose all control of his actions and his reasons such that we can justify mitigating murder to manslaughter, right? What are the types of fact patterns here? Well, the most classic, right, and what you're going to hear is kind of your just most seminal voluntary manslaughter example is the spouse who comes home and finds his or her spouse in bed with another person, right? This is kind of your most classic voluntary manslaughter analysis, right? A person comes home, finds their spouse having an affair with another person, and they lose control, right? Very suddenly and intensely, they experience this, right, heightened state of passion, right? They act in this heat of passion. And in that case, we're going to say that that passion, right, that emotion, whatever it is, that anger, that resentment, that fear, that jealousy, whatever that heightened heat of passion emotion is, right, we're going to say that that is actually the result of adequate provocation in most circumstances. The provocation being coming home and finding your spouse having an affair, witnessing your spouse have an affair with another person. We're going to say most courts are going to say that that level of provocation is usually adequate. Right now, important to recognize that it's always a very fact-specific totality of the circumstances analysis. This is going to be a question for the jury to decide. This is not a question of law. So a juror, right, a fact finder, is going to look at all of the facts, weigh the totality of the circumstances, right? It's just important to recognize that very subjective, right, qualities, anything that goes to the disposition of the person, the sober or intoxication level, right, the mental capacity are really outside the scope of how a normal person or an ordinary person would have acted in that situation. Right, so what are examples then of times where it would be provocation that is insufficient or not adequate? The most classic would be at common law. We say words alone do not constitute adequate provocation. So a difference has to be made between coming home and finding your spouse in bed with another person, right? Common law and most courts today would say that is the type of provocation that is adequate, versus somebody telling you that your spouse is having an affair, right? Words alone at common law do not constitute adequate provocation. So a person telling you, hey, your wife's cheating on you, right? That's not enough. In order to have the adequate provocation, right, to have sufficient provocation to mitigate a charge from murder to manslaughter, right, that person, that defendant would actually have had to witness it happen, right? They need to see the spouse cheating on them, right? Just hearing about it, that's words, and words alone are not going to be enough to constitute adequate provocation. Now, it is important, that's the common law rule. It's important, and a lot of courts are still going to follow that rule today. However, it is important to note that some courts today distinguish informational words from insulting words, right? So insulting words would be what it sounds like, right? Words that insult, right? You say, hey, you're stupid, or hey, you're insufferable, right? Whatever it is, a word that you're just like, you are this, right? That's generally insulting, right? And it doesn't matter how hateful, how hurtful it is, that type of language is never going to be enough, really, in any court by itself to be adequate provocation, right? Insulting words are never enough to justify by themselves alone a murder charge to being mitigated to a manslaughter charge, right? Now, some courts, though, are going to distinguish insulting words from informational words, right? Informational words inform the listener of something that's happening, right? That would be our example of, hey, buddy, your wife is cheating on you. Or maybe even worse, the person who's having the affair tells the spouse about it. So that would be, hey man, while you were at work last night, I had an affair with your spouse, right? And then this person loses control and kills the person who told him that, right? Well, at common law, words alone do not constitute adequate provocation. So that person would not be entitled to having that murder charge mitigated to voluntary manslaughter. But some courts might say, right, they're going to distinguish between informational words and insulting words. And really those courts are saying, look, informational words are really more than just words, right? Informational words carry a lot of power. It's akin to actual action in those cases. So for that reason, if this person is told informational words, something like that, hey buddy, while you were at work yesterday, I cheated on you, or I had an affair with your wife, right? And then this person flies off the handle and kills that person, right? Some courts will say, well, you know, even though that was words that led to this, because of their informational, right, that could in some cases constitute adequate provocation. right? So the hard part of this analysis, and what you really want to be cognizant of, is what the ordinary person is, right? Because some courts, and the way this can get a little bit tricky is there is no bright line rule. And right, today, some courts are going to allow jurors to have some subjectivity in the analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.